So, Kari, for many years you were married to a woman with children, serving as a Christian missionary. Now you're an out gay man in an interracial marriage. How has this changed your experience of the world around you?
I think that it has changed my view in two different ways. First, for example, earlier when I went to church or restaurant, I didn't think of people's racial background, but I saw them as people. And if somebody had asked afterwards that, for example, how many people of color were in church, I couldn't tell because I didn't think of my audience or people in that way. But you have forced me to pay attention to this issue. That I remember that when we first time went to met our home church, afterwards you told me that it was nice church, but only very few people of color in that church. And I started to think of that, and next time I paid attention, I realized that it's true that there were only a handful of people of color. And I remember then that when I took you to a restaurant on your birthday, it was nice, expensive restaurant, and and
Yes.
I recognized that you were uncomfortable there, but I couldn't figure out why you were so uncomfortable. But later, when we left the restaurant, you told me that there weren't any people of color, only white people, and I didn't recognize that. It didn't even come into my mind. And I have been trying to understand why my view of world is so different than yours. And probably it's because of my background. I was born and grew up in Finland. And when I was young, all people around me were white people, Finns. I didn't see people of color except on TV or when missionaries brought some of their friends to preach in Finnish churches. And we have never had slavery, so I don't have the same package as many people on this continent have. And I think that this is one reason why I see so differently. And also the question was about marriage, that I was married to a woman, white woman. And I think that also in that area, and in that sense, I recognize now that I was privileged in a sense that when I was married to a woman, I was respected Christian pastor, missionary, and Bible scholar. But when I got married with you, I recognized that I lost this privilege in a sense. And in that sense, I paid a high price, but I don't regret it, but I paid high price that especially some evangelical Christians, when they see us together, they look down us because I'm gay, first of all. And I'm sure that some people also look down us because of our age difference. They think that I'm some kind of sugar daddy. Although it's not true at all.
Which you are definitely not. Yes,
no, it's not true at all in our relationship. But I recognize that some people perhaps think in that way.
Right.
And also some people think or look down us because of your skin color. I can't understand that at all because of my background, but I understand that some people in this continent, they have different background and they don't accept interracial marriages.
Right. So we're both gay men from different backgrounds, as you've touched on. And in what ways do you think we experience privilege differently from each other? And how do these differences impact our relationship?
This is an interesting question, and this also caused some tension between us because we see the world so differently. That I think that you are more privileged than I am.
In what way?
Especially in the sense of language, that English is your first language. And for example, if you are looking for a job, so it's big advantage for you because you speak English fluently. And I have faced my limitations or limits quite often. For example, in job interviews, I have recognized that one issue has been that because English is not my first language. And some churches, they are not willing to invite me to speak because they are concerned that perhaps some people in audience, they wouldn't understand my accent. So I feel that you are privileged in this sense.
Mm-hmm. What about in terms of our relationship now? How do you think these differences impact the way that we relate to each other?
You understand me quite well. Quite often you have to you have to repeat if you mumble. So I often ask, "What did you say?" And then you have to answer. And sometimes you are lost in translation that you don't understand what I say. But it doesn't affect very much on our relationship. Age probably to some extent that younger people usually see world a little bit in different way than people at my age. So sometimes it causes some misunderstandings, but it's not big issue in my opinion. Probably it's bigger issue in public context because I'm not probably as uncomfortable about our age difference, but sometimes I sense that you are a little bit uncomfortable in certain situations because you think that people think that I'm some kind of sugar daddy.
Well, I mean, it also affects me in a totally different way because I am the racialized person. I self-identify as somebody of mixed race because I do have many races that are mixed within my genealogy. But at the same time, this is the way I look, and I do understand the way the world works. And I live in North America, and I'm very conscious of how people view skin color because I meet these thoughts and actions on a daily basis. So I cannot separate my identity and how I think of myself from how I see people interacting with me. You know, I play in that space, and it impacts our marriage because people therefore then interact with us in different ways. You speak of language being or accent being a different way that people interact with us, and it's true. I do find that people are more apt to listen to what I have to say if we're speaking together than you, because again, I slow down and I speak in a clearer way. But at the same time, I don't think you realize that when we're standing together, let's say after church during coffee hour, people automatically come up to you first because you look like somebody that they're more familiar with. You're older, you read as white Canadian, and they don't know you're from another country until you open your mouth. So they approach you first. And I therefore have to insert myself into the conversation and create dialogue where we're all on a level playing field. And then it may seem that the conversation shifts towards me because I am therefore at that point in control of how we're having a dialogue. And you might read that as, you know, your accent therefore plays a part. Whereas I would, from my perspective, see it as, well, here I am having to insert myself into another conversation as a racialized minority because I am not given the equal playing field that you would. It's built into my very nature to be sensitive to these things because I haven't had a choice. I've had to be. When people are speaking with me or they're speaking with you or they're speaking with us, I think it'd be incorrect for me to say that race is playing a factor, age is playing a factor, sexuality is playing a factor. We don't know for sure. But all I can do, I think, is make correlations between experiences where I'm just by myself in a setting where I am the only person of color.
What are some things that you wish I was more aware of regarding the intersection of race, age, character, and culture?
Like you said, we have had many tense discussions because we come from different areas. And I think part of the tension comes from I think a lack of understanding that just because someone has an experience that the other person doesn't understand, it doesn't mean that that experience is not valid, or it does not exist, or is not something that is important. I think it's very important, we're realizing, to validate and to listen to what the other person has to say and to enter into that space together. Because the whole point of these interactions, these conversations, I think, is to grow our understandings of how we walk through the world, because we've chosen to walk through the world together. I think it's important that you open also your worldview, because it's the reality of your life that you're married to somebody of color. So when we have conversations where I think some thoughts come up that are foreign to you or that don't make sense or so on, I think it's important that you, obviously we talk about these things together, but ask yourself, in what ways have I allowed this to occur? In what ways can I help? Because it's not about an oppression Olympics. I'm not trying to sit here and say that, poor me, and this is, I'm just trying to share what my reality is, because that reality is also part of your life. And I think it's important for also for you to bring context based on, your own cultural background. But just, I think the most important thing, just to enter into these conversations with an open mind.